With so many cool heroes in Deadlock to choose from, I'm on a mission to learn them all. I'm going to spend 50 games with each character to discover what they can teach me and how they can help me become a better player. Afterwards, I'll discuss my findings on things like builds, positioning, playstyle, and of course, fun, all for the love of learning. So today, let's talk about Paradox. When the series began and I had spent a vast majority of my time on Page, I viewed myself pretty strictly as a support player. I was interested in pushing myself into other roles to test myself and develop different skills, but part of me wasn't sure if I would find success. Regardless, in an effort to learn as much as I could, I knew I'd have to step outside of my comfort zone and experience different heroes and different roles. So far, I've done the healer in Kelvin, the carry in Warden, the roamer in Vindicta, and the frontliner in Billy. All that remained now was the pick hero, and having a few folks in the comments suggest her, I went with Paradox. While I was excited to round off each of the roles, as I've had an absolute blast thus far, what I wasn't quite expecting was to find myself a new main. I've been absolutely blown away by Paradox, and while I meshed well with the other heroes I've tried, Paradox has set a new bar for me, rivaled only by Page. She's so fun to play, so fluid to control, and technical enough to make something as simple as landing a swap extremely satisfying, while also offering a high skill ceiling to chase. There's so many elements of her kit that, to me, exemplify what makes Deadlock special, and she does so in such a unique way. From her movement to her abilities to how she can be built, the diversity and versatility that runs through the entire game really shines through on Paradox. However, while I had a lovely time with Paradox, Deadlock itself has been in an interesting place for these 50 games, which has presented me with a unique set of challenges. At time of recording, being the end of May 2026, we're going through some experiments with the urn, which has seen their mechanics drastically changed, resulting in a huge shift in the meta and games as a whole. Normally, I would prefer to focus entirely on my experience with the hero and avoid discussing metas as they'll always change, but these last few weeks have taught me an important lesson in adapting to the state of the game and enduring its difficulties. While I had a lot to take away from how much fun I had with Paradox, I've also had a lot to learn from the challenges I and many other players have faced in this patch. As Deadlock continues to evolve, I'll always have more things to adapt to, and this meta has given me an opportunity to test myself in my adaptability. There were lots of ups and downs throughout this episode and many a difficult game, but one thing is for sure, which is that there's no hero I would have rather faced this challenge with than Paradox. So if you're unfamiliar with Paradox, here's a quick rundown on her kit. Her one are her pulse grenades, which pulse when they land, dealing damage in a dome around the grenade, growing larger with each pulse. When an enemy is damaged, they're slowed briefly, and a stack of damage amp is applied to the enemy, increasing all of Paradox's damage against them by 4% per stack at base. When leveled, it gains reduced cooldown, increased damage and spirit scaling, and an extra 4% damage amp per stack alongside an increase to the grenade's duration. Since the pulse grenade expands on a 0.8 second interval, this adds an extra 2 full pulses to the grenade, bringing it up from 4 at base to 6. Paradox's 2 is her time wall, which she casts in front of herself, slowing enemy projectiles and bullets that pass through it while enhancing friendly ones. Enemies that touch the wall are very briefly slowed, and any friendly bullets fired through the wall gain additional speed and an extra 30% damage. When leveled, the wall gains increased size and duration, will silence when touched for 2.3 seconds. The weapon damage is more than doubled to 65%, and it also gains 2 additional charges. Her 3 is called Kinetic Carbine, which is a shot of spirit damage Paradox charges up before firing, which applies time stop to enemies it hits, briefly freezing them in place. The longer the shot is charged for, the more damage it'll do, giving you 3.5 seconds at base to hold the full charge. While the carbine is charging, Paradox can hover in the air when she aims down sights, and when fully charged, she'll also gain increased movement speed. Carbine deals spirit damage, but it scales with weapon damage, and can interact with certain gun items such as Mystic Shot when fired. When leveled, it gains increased time stop duration, reduced cooldown, and an extra 2 seconds to the full charge hold, as well as increased damage scaling. Finally, Paradox's 4 is called Paradoxical Swap, where she fires a projectile that swaps your position with an enemy's if it hits. The swap deals spirit damage, and if you swap an enemy through a time wall, it'll still apply its slow and silence. When leveled, you gain 200 barrier after a swap, which scales with spirit, reduced cooldown and cast range, and at max, you can swap all enemies within 7 meters of a target you hit, as well as dealing an additional 10% max health damage. For me, the coolest part of Paradox is how complex her kit is, and how interesting all of her ability interactions are. Each ability on their own is extremely powerful and useful, but depending on how I chose to combine them, I could take Paradox in so many different directions that all felt effective and fun to use. I could play around Swap and Carbine to catch enemies and force picks, I could work around Bombs to focus more on dealing damage in team fights, or I could even build into Time Walls to play a more defensive supporting role. With Paradox's high mobility and solid weapon damage, she feels great at every stage of the game, and whether I needed to hunker down with the team or get active across the map, there was always the right tool for the job. One of the most impactful benefits of doing this series for me has been using heroes as a means to experiment with and learn different areas of the game I might not interact with otherwise. For example, while I was comfortable with Paige when I started and I felt that I understood basic macro, in reality those understandings were more limited than I realized, as they were purely from Paige's perspective. Being a backline support hero, I was unlikely to be diving into the enemy jungle with her as I might on Paradox, or being the center of a team fight as I would on Billy, which naturally would have limited my knowledge of those important elements of macro. Each hero I've learned so far has taught me how their respective roles and playstyles impact macro, which helps to strengthen my foundational understanding of the game as a whole. This has made new heroes easier to pick up, new playstyles more natural to play, and has increased my ability to adapt during games. With that all in mind, seeing it as a bit of a weak point for myself, I wanted to focus on being as active as possible with Paradox, knowing that it was a strength of hers. I ended up finding a lot of success in this regard, but I also felt like it was a pretty natural role for me to fill, and one that I had a lot of fun with. I was able to look at it in a similar vein to playing a supporting role, where instead of thinking about how I individually could pull the most weight, I viewed my kit as an opportunity to make my teammates' lives easier, helping wherever I could. If I noticed that I had a teammate who was doing well pressuring a walker, I'd look for the right opportunity to gank whoever might be defending the lane and try to help them take it down. If I had someone like a drifter on my team who was being aggressive in the jungle, I'd make sure to position myself nearby so I could see when they went in and try to help them catch someone out. If we didn't have a support on the team, I'd buy more utility items and try to use things like Carbine or Walls to peel teammates, and if we needed some extra juice, I could build heavily into my damage output to try to make up the difference. It was a lot of fun to experiment with Paradox's kit to try to be as versatile as possible, and feeling as naturally as I did with Paradox, it gave me room to put my entire focus on those macro decisions. In not overthinking and not fixating on actually piloting Paradox, I felt like I was able to play much smoother than I otherwise might have, and find more opportunities to rotate, make plays, or net picks. Well, there's been a lot of very specific or even targeted things that I've learned throughout the series. One of the largest improvements has absolutely been just the way that I play and how confident and naturally I can do so. As with all things, practice makes perfect, and where I used to have to think about every single wall bounce or every decision I made, I feel like I've finally reached a point where most things feel comfortable and fluid. Considering that comfort that I felt with Paradox, it was then an interesting challenge for me to contend with the earn changes, as they felt the opposite, throwing that sense of flow for a loop. Combined with some balance changes to heroes and timing changes to things like box spawns, while I felt comfortable piloting Paradox, it was the most uncomfortable I've felt with the actual flow of games since I first started playing. Now, not to get too into the weeds, but to give you some overview, the central pillar of this adjusted earn is that depositing it takes several seconds depending on how it's favored, and in order to flip or contest it, you need to heavy melee the earn deposit. For the first few days, the deposit was actually in mid on top of the bridge, but it was soon returned to depositing on the sides of the map, specifically under the bridges. With heavy melees being required to contest, it massively skewed the risk-reward of earn fights, and it essentially packed entire teams into a melee parry fest under the bridges. In response to these extremely close quarters scrappy fights, AoE abilities became king, and almost every earn fight turned into a total disaster, pretty much guaranteeing one of the teams got wiped. Since earn is so valuable and having to rely on it as the game's central comeback mechanic, it was far more likely for steamrolls to happen where the team in the lead would have a massive advantage in maintaining that lead through the earn. Making the choice to split push would just put your team at an unwinnable disadvantage over the earn, and even if you did just concede the earn and take an objective as a trade, it was rarely worth it. While there was some counterplay and further into the iteration people were adjusting, it felt like most macro decisions in the game revolved around the urn, which put things into these weird 5-minute cycles where not much would happen until you got called to show up for another bloodbath. Like many players, I didn't like this iteration of the urn, but in the spirit of the series, I chose to approach it from an improvement mindset, and regardless of my frustrations, use it as an opportunity to learn. It would have been really easy for me to blame all of my losses or all of my struggles on the urn, but that would have diminished any progress that I made with Paradox, and knowing that everyone was on a level playing field, it was up to me to adjust whether I liked it or not. While my opinion on these urn mechanics didn't change in the end, I was able to find a bit of that flow and comfort around it. I adjusted my AP order, I changed up my build, and I tried to make different macro decisions specifically around the urn. A big one was that if we were down and needed to rely on a comeback urn, knowing how hard a full team fight would be, I would try to get a pick right before urns spawned to net an advantage. I was also less likely to look to trade objectives and more likely to concede our objectives if it meant securing an urn, which did feel a bit odd at first, but led to some important successes. All in all, while challenging and in some regards awkward, I've taken a valuable lesson from this urn experiment that in the face of an ever-changing game like Deadlock, it falls on me to adjust to those changes and do my best to overcome their difficulties. There's nothing to be gained from me making excuses or shifting blame to external factors, and in taking full responsibility, I can remain focused and push through to continue learning. At time of writing, the urn has actually been changed again to be a King of a Hill type mechanic, so I'm looking forward to learning the new mechanic and trying to keep up the momentum. When it comes to building Paradox, as I mentioned, she's extremely versatile, benefiting from a wide range of items, be it gun, spirit, or utility. For me, I really enjoyed building into gun and carbine early before I transitioned into bomb and swap, which from my understanding is a common approach. The early gun items gave me more room to pressure lane consistently since Paradox's cooldowns are pretty long, and having carbine do heavy damage early on made it easier to take good trades and hopefully net some kills. Once lane was over and I started to focus on roaming, I would then invest into spirit to make swaps and bombs hit harder, which would set me up for easier picks and more impact in team fights. For my AP order, I liked putting 1 point into both bomb and carbine in lane before I maxed carbine to deal as much damage as possible. Afterwards, I like to put 2 points into ult for the cooldown and range before I maxed bomb, but if I was in a position where I wasn't getting a lot of picks and I was seeing more team fights, I'd rush bomb earlier. Of course, depending on the game and the AP order I ended up going with, my item order would also change, but there were loads of standouts on Paradox that I really enjoyed using. I'd always go for my gun spike in lane, with my first item being headshot booster to not only increase my pressure in lane, but also to upgrade into Headhunter later in the game, which offered a great balance of damage and sustain. Afterwards, depending on the lane, I'd either go with monster rounds or resto shot, depending on if I needed more pressure or more sustain. To finish off the spike, Mystic Shot was a must-have for me since it procs when you land a carbine shot, and it scales well later into the game as I would invest into bomb. This meant that even if I was finished investing specifically into gun items, I could still increase carbine's damage potential by scaling Mystic Shot. Finally, I'd either go with slowing bullets since it's just a great all-round item, or weakening headshot if the enemy team had a lot of tanks and I wanted to set up for an early upgrade to crippling. For my vitality spike, I always went with stamina mastery as Paradox has excellent movement speed and it helped me both be more active and escape more tough situations. I also really liked Enchanter's Emblem as when I was roaming for a pick, I'd often be at full health and it would give me a little extra juice when I was first engaging with an enemy. I also really liked the 18% spirit resist from it, but if I was looking for a more defensive option to fill a similar role, I'd pick up spirit or weapon shielding instead. From this point on, most of my investments went into spirit items to build into bomb, aside from any counter buying I wanted to do or any utility purchases I needed. Being a pick hero, I think Paradox is a great candidate to buy items like slowing hex or knockdown, so most games I would pick up whichever of the two I needed. Mystic Burst was an early purchase I really enjoyed since it would activate from both carbine and Mystic Shot, and later in the game I could upgrade it to Tank Buster, which was a fantastic pick for beefier targets. Duration was also a must buy for me to synergize with bombs, as getting extra pulses mean more range, more damage, and more stacks of damage amp. Cooldown was also a foolproof item I couldn't go wrong with, and if I had the slot open, expansion felt great to make bombs cover even more ground. The star of the show though was, of course, Echo Shard, which when imbued on bomb massively buffs their output. output. Not only can it double the damage the bombs deal and the space they cover, but it can also double the damage amp stacks, potentially landing you well over 10. In concentrated fights like mid-boss or Urn, where people have less options to escape, you can put out an insane amount of damage extremely quickly, completely controlling the fight. It was also excellent for dealing objective damage, as dropping 2 bombs under a walker can take it down in a matter of seconds. Echo Shard is a classic item on Paradox for a reason, and while it does feel a little bit evil at times, it's hard to justify skipping. Overall, I loved my time with Paradox, and I can't wait to play more of her in the future. While I wasn't sure if I would thrive in her role, it ended up feeling far more natural to me than I expected, and it was just so much fun. Every wall bounce, every carbine, and every swap was such a joy, and same as how I felt about Paige when I first played her, Paradox just feels right for me. It's been so much fun to experiment with heroes as I go through the series, and it's so rewarding to really connect with them as I continue to improve. There have been plenty of surprises for me thus far and just as many challenges, but I stand as a far better player today than when I first kicked off the series, and I can't wait to see where I'm able to end up. Just as with the Urn changes, it rests on me to square up to the challenges that each hero presents and always do my best, striving above all else to learn. The road ahead might be a long one, but if Paradox is any indication, there's going to be plenty of fun to be had along the way. I'm officially going to be starting to stream my games as of the day this video goes live, so any folks that are interested can tune in to see my learning process in action. It'll give you the chance to ask me questions about my videos or the character I'm playing, and it should hopefully be a lot of fun. The details might change as I get used to streaming, but for now the plan is to go live at around 5 p.m. Eastern most days of the week, likely taking Tuesdays and Fridays off. Again, days and times might change, but if you're interested, you can follow me over at twitch.tv/callmekimbo_ to get notified when I'm live, which I'll also link in the description. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments what you think of Paradox and what other heroes you might like to see me learn for the series. I've also put the build ID in the description for my Paradox build if you're looking for a place to start, and you can subscribe to the channel to keep an eye out for more videos soon.